Welcome to Pay Attention, a podcast guiding you from the chaos of the mind to the clarity of the heart. Here's your host, Holly McNEILL.
Hello, episode 2 of season 2 here at Pay Attention. Well, we're off and running in 2026. Last week, we talked about how if you don't know exactly where to start, that mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually, it's all connected. So start someplace and the others will follow. When we started with Dr. Patel, doctor of osteopathic medicine, talking about less is more, good eating habits, diet, and so forth. Actually, I have listened to some of his clips on LinkedIn, and they're very informative. Things I didn't really understand about blood pressure and cholesterol. So yeah, tune in to that. But when I first started on my journey, I did start to exercise and eat better, but I really kind of was more in the spiritual realm, not really knowing I wanted better, but not knowing where to go. And it wasn't until later in the development of my practices per love that I really understood how thinking affects your world. Thinking, overthinking, trying to fix things by thinking. It's why wherever you put your attention, wherever you're thinking, whatever you're thinking about, that's what you're identifying with. That thinking creates, more importantly, something that's very fundamental to what your world looks like, how you feel, and how you walk around in this human journey. And that's the creation of habits. So today in the studio, I had the opportunity to speak to someone, Amy Kemp, and she wrote a book called I See You. And we are talking the same language here, all about the importance of paying attention. And that's exactly why this podcast is called Pay Attention, because you have the ability to pay attention, to think, to put your awareness wherever you'd like. And without paying attention, we're often on autopilot. So Amy and I talk all about habits and thinking here in this episode. I think it's called You Can't Outthink Your Habitual Thinking. So I've said enough. Let's have a listen in the studio. Unfortunately, Amy wasn't able to join us live here today. But if you have any questions or comments along the way, please let me know, and I will check in with you after the recording. Hello, I'm Holly McNEILL, and welcome to another episode of Pay Attention. And today we're going to be back to one of my favorite topics, and that is the habit. How the mind works, how the mind learns, how we can get lost in them, and how we can change them. And today I have a lovely guest who wrote a book that we're going to hear more about called I See You. Her name is Amy Kemp. Amy, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Holly.
So you've been, I've heard you referred to yourself as a habit finder coach, and obviously you've written this book, but tell us, the listeners, a little bit about how you got into this, how the book came about, and just give us a few minutes of your story.
Yeah, I'd love to. Professionally, my original job was as a high school English teacher, which I did for a very, very short time. And then got into sales, and then eventually into sales leadership, and really developing people to increase their productivity, but also just to earn more and to grow. I think the thing that has always fascinated me in everything I've done is the development of people. So I was working successfully. I had worked with a coach who used a tool called the Habit Finder, and my work with him was transformational personally. My actual output and what happened as a result of that work was astonishing, like increasing sales probably times 4. And so we had stayed in touch. He worked with a lot of people. The coach that I worked with a lot of people in my organization. And so I was in Salt Lake City speaking at an event, and I met him for dinner. We had always been friends. I told him that I had been having the same conversation with professional women who I knew just through life, not through my work, but just sitting at a game or at a community event, and all of the themes were very similar, and that I was feeling this stirring that I was supposed to get these women that I was meeting together, and somehow there was something supposed to happen. And he said, well, we're starting a training. This was on a Thursday. So we're starting a training for new coaches who want to use this tool on Monday. And it was a pretty big commitment of time and resources and energy. And I had not been thinking about starting a coaching business. I had not been looking for what tool I would use. I had not even ever considered being a coach, honestly, although I coached all the time in my work. And
isn't that amazing? It's about what comes up, what shows up in your life, right? Somehow, somewhere, there was a calling for that, and boom, there it was. It's amazing.
It's almost always how things have worked in my entire journey.
Yeah.
And I've learned to trust it.
Yes.
I've just learned it was so crazy and so outside of what I was thinking, and so against kind of conventional wisdom at the time that I just trusted it. And so I went through this.
I love that. I had that happen a couple of times when I wanted to, maybe go to a meditation class, and all of a sudden there's a 2-year book study on the New Heart of Wisdom, which is all about emptiness. And then I went to I stayed in a Buddhist home, a Dharma house, and they needed someone to help them renovate their temple, which I could do with my eyes closed, So I love that. I love that about your story.
Yeah.
So the rest is history then?
Yeah. Well, I didn't think I was starting a business. I just thought I was scratching an itch of, I would serve this particular group of people and then move on. I had kind of been faithful to the thing that showed up in front of me. And so I saw it through. What happened was that the business grew really quickly, and I found myself so enamored with really the stripped down version of the work I had always loved the most, and that I was most interested in, which is this cross section between behavior, but also our habits of thinking, and how our subconscious mind is impacting the way we're showing up in every interaction, in our ability to see a task through from start to finish, in our every thought that we're having that we're aware of, but more importantly, the more than 80% of our thoughts that are happening below the surface at that.
95,
level.
I think, is what I've heard. And you're speaking to the choir here, because really you're seeing through that lens of whatever habits and patterns that you created.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And people don't know that, and we're not taught that. So here you are to teach people that. I love that.
And the tool, the Habit Finder, is this assessment tool. Sort of takes a snapshot, if you can imagine unzipping the top of your head and sort of being able to look at where your brain has these grooves that almost always have been created because at some point in your life, they have helped you survive. And
yes. Oh yeah. A lot of these habits were created in your formative years when you don't have a lot of your prefrontal cortex and you're trying to survive. 80% of us who deal with trauma in little t or big T, or just day-to-day living. Yeah.
Yeah. And imagine, I'll give you an example from a conversation I had even today of someone who has built a really successful business over about 30 years of time. And this business is what allowed her to survive and thrive with her family. But the business has shifted. That industry that she works in has changed a lot, and the business is shrinking. And her brain is creating a lot of resistance to her creating something new or moving on to something new. And you can imagine she has a deep groove saying, this is the thing that has helped me survive. This is the thing that has paid my bills and like provided for me for so long. And so letting go of that is flying in the face of evolution, essentially. Like it's flying in the face of
to keep you safe, right?
Yes, of survival.
Yeah. Let's talk about that deep groove for a minute. I did a talk at Yale, and I mentioned the famous kind of 7 words by Canadian psychotherapist Donald Hebb: nerve cells that fire together, wire together, right? And they create this really strong piece. And for her, in this example, that business is what kept her safe and what kept her going, regardless. And I had a similar experience. And so once the idea is to change that, the brain's like, wait, no. this is not how it works. Yeah. Absolutely. But I love your when you say you can't outthink your thought habits. Right.
Oh, you can't outwork your thought habits.
You can't outwork your thought habits. So fighting that idea, isn't going to help. Right.
Yeah. Here's my typical client is a really hardworking kind of type A woman who has earned everything she's got through her hard work. She's worked harder than everyone around her to get what she's got. The problem is, at some point you reach a threshold where just working harder isn't going to get you what you actually want: more income, more influence, more impact. And I'll tell you the story of my own experience when I kind of had a moment where that became very real. My husband and I were meeting with our financial advisor. It was like our annual meeting. And I had filled out all the forms that you fill out, kind of, where we were financially, where we wanted to be, your goals for the future. And we walked into her office and sat down, and I remember what I was wearing. I remember the color of the chair I was sitting on. I remember the sound of the air conditioner. It was just one of those moments. And she said, I have reviewed all of your paperwork, all the forms you filled out, and you're doing a great job. Like, you're not overspending. You're doing a good job with managing what you have. There's only one problem if you want to achieve the goals you've set that you've outlined in these forms. And then she leaned forward and she said, you're not making enough money. And I can remember just feeling like the air left the room. Because
like you're working hard, you're doing all the right things. And
I was working very full time. Our kids were at that time, I call it the Uber era of parenting, where nobody drives and everybody was in things. And so I had no more capacity. Working harder was not going to be the answer. And that
I have
left
a friend
me,
who's got 4 daughters. She's in the Uber.
Yes. Yeah. I wasn't willing to sacrifice more time to work harder. I was working full time already.
Right.
So I knew the answer to what I wanted wasn't in doing something different, but it was really in being something different.
Okay.
I knew at that moment that.
Was this around the same time that you met the habit finder guy, or? Yeah.
Yep.
That's how life works. I love it.
Yeah. And actually this meeting happened a few months before I met with that coach, or, before we met for dinner. So he did not know about that conversation. And so that was also interesting how it all kind of ties together.
You kind of, even believing you can do it differently, or that there's another path, right? Just putting it out there that there's another way is, that stuff shows up. So
I also knew I had to do some digging deeply into my own patterns of thinking and really look at what things were no longer serving me. There were some messages around, the only way to fail is to quit. Well, sometimes you do have to quit some things
Yeah. I've done
in
that.
order
Been there,
to
yep.
go to the next place. I mean, there were some deeply ingrained messages that I sort of needed to unearth and really evaluate whether they were serving me anymore or whether it was time for something new. I
Nice.
also, during that season of transition, got very quiet, and I got very, very, the group of people about which I would talk around these topics about my career, about what I was going to do moving forward. It was so tiny. I was talking to maybe 2 people because everyone had an agenda in keeping me where I was. Everyone had something invested in me staying in the
Right.
I knew I had to, sort of like when you have a brand new baby, like I wasn't going to expose this new thought of there's something new coming for me to very many people at
And
the
that's
beginning.
smart. That's smart for any listeners out there, because a lot of people are going to give you advice, and maybe some people have skin in the game. And so,
Oh.
yeah, just,
I wanted to talk to everyone about it. That's the other thing. I wanted to, because it was uncomfortable to sit in the unknown and to kind
yeah.
of sit in that.
That's another thing the brain tries to keep you away from: the unknown, the unfamiliar, right?
The
So sitting in that by
uncertain.
yourself or with this, yeah, I can totally see that. It is
Yeah.
uncomfortable. So change is always uncomfortable until it isn't.
Yeah. Yeah. So the book itself, the core message is that you can't outwork your thought habits. At some
Okay.
point, the thing you want next doesn't come from just working harder.
Yeah.
And there's a real sort of grief that comes with that, because that feels controllable. That feels like what you know, that feels comfortable. And that also has helped you survive and thrive.
Yeah.
I'll give an example. One of my clients, I tell this story in the book, but she grew up in a home where she, at a very young age, had to be the adult in the home. Her mom dealt with a lot of addiction. And so she was acting as an adult at a very young age. And she worked very hard to get out of that situation and then to create a life for herself. The problem was, when I met her, her survival of working harder than everyone else had her working 70 to 80 hours a week in her own business.
Wow.
And she was legitimately having some health issues and some red flags that were saying, if you
How
keep
old was she
doing
about
this,
this time?
I'd say 40s or 50s is when I usually encounter this.
Yeah.
Like you've built something. It depends. People hit it at different points.
Yeah.
But what has transpired is so fascinating. Her need to take care of everything and to be available for everyone at any time, and her inability to trust her own intuition about how much was enough really became, I would say, if you apply a survival mechanism past the point of needing it, it becomes damaging and detrimental and harmful.
Do you talk about that intuition and trust in your book?
I
Yeah,
do.
I love that. I love that, because it's not just about the habits you form. That's very much the cerebral part of it, right? But there's also the trust and the intuition, and you've seen it in your own life where things show up
Yeah.
if you
And you
kind of
can't
open to it.
shut off access to your intuition or override it in one area and then access it in all of these other areas. So because my client all of her life had this intuitive knowing that she shouldn't have to be parenting her siblings, right? I shouldn't have to, but I have to override that.
Yes,
So if you
okay.
override that enough for a long enough period of time, well, guess what else your intuition tells you? It tells you when you've worked enough for the day. That's enough. You can go home. I'm tired. I've done good work. That's enough. Your intuition tells you when you're full or when you're hungry or when you trust someone or don't trust someone. And when we lose access to that because we've overridden it for so long, and it's a whisper, it's real, it's
It
very
totally is a whisper.
quiet.
It is. I'm just learning, after all I've been through and all of my journey, I'm really learning to trust that now, to the point where I really just serve the present moment and whatever comes up from my intuition. And that comes a long way to letting go of those habits, to unraveling those habits, to sitting in that stillness
Yeah.
and listening to what
Yeah.
comes up. Yeah, Michael Singer
Yeah.
talks a lot about just serving the present moment, because that intuition is, that sense of that true self of who you are, guiding you, and often so covered up by all those habits and patterns. I say that again, what you just said. If your survival, if you've outgrown
Oh,
your,
oh yeah. When you employ a survival mechanism past the point of needing it, it
yes,
becomes damaging and
yes,
detrimental.
yes, and
Hmm.
so many people do that, I
Oh
believe,
my
because
gosh.
we're not taught about, and yes, people are going to be in their 40s and 50s by when they come to you, um, but this is something that we should be learning about,
Oh,
in
you can learn it
elementary
at any
school, junior
age.
high, high school, college. They're just now recognizing the quarter life crisis.
Hmm.
People in their late 20s and early 30s, and all of a sudden they're like, how did I get here? What
Hmm.
happened?
Yeah.
And what I love about it is that it's very provable scientifically. Even though we're talking about intuition and guidance, the way the mind works, the way the brain works, it's very provable. And
Hmm.
John Kabat-Zinn has his 8-week mindfulness-based stress reduction course, and they showed in that time less gray matter in the amygdala, which is the alarm center, and more in the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex. And so this changing of your habits and change, your mind is very powerful,
Hmm.
right? And so it's you need to change it, right? I mean, everyone has that ability, even though they can't see it.
Yeah.
And talking about seeing it, tell us about the title. How did you come up with I
Mm.
See You? And I mean, it doesn't really talk about habits and patterns in the title too much. So tell us about
Hmm.
that.
Yeah. Um, and it's interesting. I fought for this title because the publisher wanted the title to be more focused on me, or, as the centerpiece, but the book's not really about me. It's really for my reader.
Oh,
So I
nice.
had met a woman locally at a community event, and I really liked her. Just someone introduced me quickly, and I'd known about her. She sits at some really important tables, makes important decisions in our community that affect thousands of people, and is just an engaged member of our community. And so I invited her for coffee, and we met, and I just listened to her story. I was so curious about her and wanted to know her.
Mm-hmm.
And about 55 minutes into the conversation, she interrupted me and she kind of brusquely said, "Why did you invite me to coffee today?"
Yeah.
And I said the first words that came to my mind. I said, "Because I see you."
Ah, wow.
And she put her head down and just wept.
No. Wow. Yeah, I can totally see
Mhm.
that happening, because
Yeah.
so many people are trying to put on a face of what or whatever they're supposed to be. But that's
Mhm.
beautiful. That's a
Yeah.
beautiful story.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
she, after a period of time, she kind of like wiped off her face and sat up and collected herself. And she said, "Thank you. So few people do."
Wow. That's
And
beautiful.
those are my people. Like, that's who
Mm-hmm.
I work with the most. It's the
Uh-huh.
people that everyone sees, and
Yep.
they appear to have it all together. And they've maybe
Yeah.
built something, or they're,
Yes.
down the road a bit. But there's this inner feeling of isolation and loneliness in that
Hmm.
also.
Yeah. So many people, so many women, high-powered women,
Mhm.
appear to have it all together. I
Yeah.
I was, leading large projects. I was doing hospitals, but on the inside, I felt anxious and worthless, no
Yeah.
matter what I achieved, right? Because of those habits and patterns. So,
Mhm.
so if
Yeah.
you're one of those women out there, and I know you're hearing us, and I know you're out there, it's not uncommon, and you're not alone. And Amy's book is here. Amy's here.
Mm.
Tell us, Amy, if so, anyone out there listening that's hearing you right now, what's a tip besides read your book
Yeah.
that you can give them, right now, if
Mm.
they're feeling like, you know what, that's me. No one sees me. They don't
Mhm.
understand how much I struggle, or, no matter how successful I might be.
Yeah. I mean, concretely, I would encourage someone to take the Habit Finder assessment. It's free, so you can take it on my website at amykemp.com.
Mhm.
You'll get all the results immediately, and you can kind of look through and see what the patterns of thinking are where you have risk. Know that when you look at the results, there's like a bar, and it's either red, orange, yellow, or green. And overachievers get really worried about red. They
Yes.
do
Oh
not
my
like
God,
that.
I failed.
It does not mean you're failing. It means
Yeah.
that you have high risk in this particular area, meaning
Mhm.
if you're not consciously aware, your brain will very easily slide down this pattern of thinking. So
Mhm.
it's just a really great mirror because we don't see ourselves very clearly,
Right.
unfortunately.
We don't know
And
the
this
lens we're seeing and creating through. Right.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I think we were designed to live in community. I have a hunch about this. It's getting more and more clear, but I think we aren't designed to see ourselves clearly. I think that's why we need other people.
Community.
But the other thing
Mhm.
I would just say to someone who's feeling that way is to never apologize for investing in yourself in a very concrete way,
Yeah.
whether that be a book or whether that be something more in terms of some sort of experience, a class, a coaching engagement,
Mhm.
a retreat, but to if you're feeling a stirring or you're feeling an isolation, instead of trying to fix it by working harder or achieving more, to give
Or
yourself the gift of like some reflection, some inner work, some
right.
investment in you.
They call it the middle way, right? Instead of trying to push it away or pull things towards you, just sit back and quietly. I'll have to go and check that out. The free habit finder tool on
Mhm.
your website, because my practices per love are about watching your mind. So once you know
Mm.
those tools, you can catch them. There's a moment when those patterns come up, and we always react the same way unless we catch it and
Oh, I did it
see it.
2 minutes ago. Yes,
Yeah.
always. My brain
Yeah.
will go to catastrophe in 2 seconds.
Yeah. I've
But
watched
if
it even during this podcast too, going, oh, blah, blah, blah. It's like, just stop. Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
You
stop, come back to
can
the center. Yeah.
you can catch it and say like, "Oh, there it is."
Yep.
Like
There it is.
observe it
Mm-hmm.
without judgment and just sort
Yes.
of let it be what it is. That's
The
trying to
very,
protect me.
yeah.
Thank you for trying to protect me, but I'm safe. It's
The
very
very
true.
definition of mindfulness itself is moment
Mhm.
to moment, non-judgmental, but curious awareness.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mm.
Beautiful. I love it. We are so in sync. Speaking, preaching to the choir here. I love it. I love your book. Beautiful cover. Amy on the front. So, how do people? You've already mentioned your website, and
Mhm.
I suppose everything's on there for them to get a hold of you. And
Yeah. Also, some fun things about the book. There's some great video content around different concepts that I teach about in the book that you'll really enjoy. So,
uh
lots to dig into
oh,
on
fun,
amykemp.com.
fun.
Mm-hmm.
And what's next for you? Just promoting the book and just
Mm.
keeping on with your work and.
Yeah, right now, I'm actually heading out. This is going to be kind of fun this fall. I'm doing a listening tour. I never really wanted to do a book tour. It felt I don't know. I'm actually just so tired of talking about myself. But I'm eternally fascinated by women. And so I'm heading out to different cities this fall where I have different hostesses who are just gathering 20 women in a
Yep.
room.
Hmm.
I have some questions. I want to know how they're doing. I want to know
Yeah, I
what's
love
happening.
that. I love that.
Um,
So your community, you talked about your community. Where are you
mhm.
located now?
I live in Chicago,
Chicago. Okay. And what
that
city,
area.
do you have a list just off the top of your head, a couple of cities you'll be?
Yeah, I'm doing quite a few. I'll do several around the Chicagoland area. Obviously, that's big. I'll be in Atlanta for sure. I'm working on some dates in Florida. I'm actually just scheduling them right now.
Oh,
So yeah, we just finalized Atlanta and then Kansas City, um, probably be in Texas, perhaps Oklahoma also.
that's
So yeah.
exciting. That sounds wonderful. And of course, this
hmm
podcast, there's a lag on when it goes out. So maybe you'll be
Yeah.
well in the midst of all of
We'll
that.
make sure the dates are up on my website so people could
Yes.
pop in.
Wonderful. I love that. Well, thank you, Amy, for coming today. I'm glad that we connected and that you're a guest here because so many times, over and over. Another thing about habits is anything you do over and over and over again becomes a habit. So the more I can talk about habits and how important it is to pay attention, the better. So thank you so much for joining me. Good luck on your listening tour and your book. And thank you.
Thanks, Holly. Appreciate you.
And thank you, listeners, for being here for another episode of Pay Attention. And the name of the podcast is Pay Attention, because you really have a lot more over the life you're creating, the world you're creating, if you see the lens from which you're creating. So thank you for joining me, and I will see you here on another episode of Pay Attention. All right, back in the studio live. Don't you just love Amy's energy? She is so calm and peaceful, something I'm really trying to bring forward in myself as well. She had so much great information. Trusting your intuition. We spend so much time, especially those people that, they have it all together, working harder, trying to just prove ourselves on the outside, when you can't ever outthink or outwork that need to get recognition. And if you can just let that go and just sit in that silence and trust who you are, trust what comes up, all of these things that we talked about in this podcast, that really is a journey. And I've said that many, many, many times to, all of this overthinking is really the problem. When we can sit back in our intuition and our awareness and take a look at that thinking, question it, and let it go, there's so much more, and you see life differently. So there was quite a lag, actually. We recorded this, I think, last summer. So her listening tour is, I believe, over. And if she were here, I'd ask her how it went. So Amy, if you're listening, I certainly hope it went well, because it's not about how many people read your book or how many listeners I have on this podcast. It's about touching the hearts of those who are ready to hear it. So hopefully those on her listening tour got that beautiful, calm, peace, energy, intuition, and love that she's sending out. And go if you like, go out and find her book. Try the Habit Finder on her website, because really knowing your habits is the first thing. Recognizing what it is you're living from is the first one of the first steps to changing it. So thank you, everyone, for being here for the second episode of season 2. I've really enjoyed the development of this podcast and hope to really increase the arc and the guests that we're bringing you. Next week, we have a wonderful guest talking more about psychedelics and how those can work to really help you see and open and what actually they do to you when you take that kind of journey. So please join us next week for another episode of Pay Attention.
Thanks for watching Pay Attention with Holly McNEILL. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. See you next week on Wednesday at 10 o'clock Pacific, 1 o'clock Eastern.